Welcome to African American Affairs 2021 Black Leadership Institute. So your hosts for today are going to be me, Trinity Hawkins, the Director of Service at AAA, Brenna Boyd, the Director of Educational Enrichment at AAA, and Faith Avery, who's the Director of Professional Development at AAA, who you all know. We are all so glad to have you here. Before we get started, we're going to introduce our panelists. So we're going to start with Val Wimes. Val Wimes, the humanitarian, is a high energy and visionary at UT alum. She's a creative strategist whose mind does not pause and must sleep sometimes. Driven by the lack of action in the world, she's an ambitious, resourceful, community-oriented human being who is determined to reduce social injustice throughout the world. Val spent most of her time obtaining water for an area in Texas, building one of the first one-stop shop community platforms, and doing business development for other nonprofits and organizing through her LLC, Socially Immersed. Mimi Stiles. Mimi founded The Measure in 2015 to promote the use of evidence-based projects and tools to tell real-life stories beyond the numbers. Additionally, Mrs. Stiles is an AARO Fellow, past chairwoman of Miss Juneteenth, Austin Police Chiefs Award of Excellence recipient, Austin 40 Under 40 winner in 2019, past chairwoman of African TV and African TV 5, and the Austin Black Chamber's 2017 Community Leader of the Year. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Communications, a Master's of Public Administration with a concentration on national security, and was certified in performance measurement through George Washington University College of Professional Studies. And Dr. Latoya Smith. Dr. Latoya Smith is a two-time Texas Ex and the current Vice President for Diversity and Community Engagement at the University of Texas at Austin. She previously served as a Senior Associate Director of Student Services in Texas Athletics, establishing one of the strongest student support networks in all of college athletics. Prior to her role in athletics, she served as the university's Associate Vice President and Title IX coordinator, and was responsible for creating a Title IX, a robust, sustainable Title IX model. Dr. Smith is also a faculty member in the Educational Leadership and Policy Department in the College of Education, teaching higher education law and student affairs in higher education. Dr. Peniel Jospeh. Dr. Peniel E. Jospeh is in the Barbara Jordan Chair of Ethics and Political Values in the LBJ School of Public Affairs and Professor of History and the founding director of the Center for Study of Race and Democracy at the University of Texas at Austin. He is a frequent national commentator on news of issues of anti-racism, democracy, and civil rights. He has written several books on African American history, including The Sword and the Shield and Stokely, A Life. The Sword and the Shield was named as one of Time Magazine 100 must-read books of 2020. And Faith will do the rest.
Hi, y'all. Our next panelist is Jordan Walters. Jordan is a recent UT Austin graduate, and they are the former director of operations for AAA, everybody's favorite org. While on campus, they, along with other students, helped to create and mobilize a mutual aid network in the Austin area and have worked with numerous offices and organizations on projects ranging from social justice curriculums to research on surveillance practices on communities of colors. With degrees in history and African diaspora studies, Jordan's interests lie at the intersection of fashion, liberation, and community. Currently, Jordan is the flagship philanthropy lead for Austin-based jeweler Kendra Scott, but will be transitioning into a corporate retail leadership role with Amazon in the coming months, which is really exciting. And our last panelist is Alexis George. Alexis George is a UT alum and currently serves as assistant to the deputy in the Office of the Vice President for Student Affairs at the University of Texas at Austin. In her role, she assists in furthering the Division of Student Affairs strategic, programmatic, and operational priorities while coordinating projects and providing analysis on student and institutional trends. Alexis is an active member of the Black Faculty and Staff Association, Black and Latinx Alumni Advisory Board, and sits on multiple university-wide committees.
Please put some hype in the chat as we welcome our panelists. These are all amazing, accomplished people, and we're so happy to have them today.
Absolutely. So now we are going to, yeah, I see y'all hype in the chat. Absolutely. Now we are going to head into our first round of panelist questions. Just to let y'all know, we will have audience Q&A at the end of this. So be taking some notes and thinking about your questions. So our first question for our panelists will be, what has your journey in leadership looked like? What has your journey in leadership looked like? We'll start with Mimi, Alexis, Dr. Smith, Val, Jordan, Dr. Joseph. That's the order that y'all are in on my screen. So Mimi, Alexis, Dr. Smith, Val, Jordan, Dr. Joseph. Awesome.
Awesome. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to be here and to speak to y'all today. What has my my journey in leadership looked like? It looked like whoa, like it looked like that. Like, I mean, just to be honest with you, I am learning every single day, and that is just the truth of the matter. But I think where it started, though, is that it you have to learn how to follow is something that I've had to learn in order to lead. And a lot of times we have this idea about leadership, like we want to quickly get to the top. We want to quickly get to that command center and like being the one that, to make decisions and so forth. But we haven't put in the time to learn and to follow. And I got to tell you that idea about learning how, I say this all the time, a great leader is an even better follower. Every single time, a great leader can follow even better. And so, I mean, I know even myself at this point, I'm trying to put myself in spaces where I can be a great follower. And I know that that may not be exactly what this is about, but I think for me, my journey has started with being able to follow. And that has been from my work with the military going into now my work that I'm doing with Measure. So it's just being able to take direction, to listen, to not feel defensive when I'm told to do something, instead to turn that into wonderment and like, I wonder why they told me to do that. And so, but yeah, I would say that's been my journey, just a lot of teeter-tottering around and learning how to do it right.
So this is actually a really interesting question, because the number one thing that popped into my head when I first read it was, I'm literally just making it up as I go. And I think that many people, they don't really necessarily think that that's going to be an answer that somebody's going to give. But honestly, a lot of times it's just putting one foot in front of the other. And then the next thing you know, someone's like, oh, wow, you're such a leader. And you're like, I'm just out here trying to survive just like you are. So even looking at a lot of the folks who are on this panel, I'm over here having imposter syndrome. Like, how the heck did I end up on this panel with all these really awesome people? But honestly, I'd probably say too, like how it really started is that I really just wanted to know what was going on for the most part. And so if you're very curious and you always want to be in the know, you start to, like for me, I guess you could say, like when I was a student, I would just start attending as many things as I possibly could, because I never ever wanted to be caught off guard, not knowing what was happening on campus, not knowing what was happening in my city, my state, the world, etc. I just was a very curious George, LOL, pun intended there. So I wanted to know what was happening all around me. And then once you do know what's going on, you start asking a lot of questions and you start wanting to get a lot more involved. And then you're like, wait a second, how can I actually really positively affect change now that I kind of understand these systems a little bit more? And then also, to be quite honest with you, I would honestly just kind of start saying things and asking these questions, and people would come up to me and just be like, wow, like I was so afraid to say that. Thank you so much for saying things that we were all thinking. And I'm over here like, okay, well, if everyone is thinking it, then maybe I should start speaking up more and saying these things a lot more. And so I just kind of started doing a lot of that. So again, I wouldn't say that it's any sort of wonderful, like professional pathway to leadership. You really kind of have to make it and choose it, whatever fits best for you and your personality and your interests. There is no one right way to be a leader. There are so many things that, again, like I said before, you can make up as you go. So you all have a lot of time.
Well, so I was one where I was born, I had it all mapped out, and I'm exactly where I said I was going to be. No, I'm just kidding. Very similar to Mimi and Alexis. I thought I was going to have a plan, and I thought I was going to be somewhere, and this is what I was going to do as a leader, and all of that went out the window. So I don't know if I have the, similar to how Mimi with the wavy arms, I was thinking about those inflatables, like I totally can relate. But when I think about my journey, the one thing that has been consistent, it's been about service. It hasn't been about position or power or status. It's been about service and purpose. And so, and that has been what's been consistent throughout my journey. I'm not going to say I always wanted to know what was going on, but I always wanted to be able to fix things. And I'm a builder, I'm a collaborator. And so my time here at Texas has really been about how do I serve? How do I serve those that need help? How do I serve those who are not being served? And so, I'm not always the loudest voice, but when I speak, it's going to matter. And I'm going to be very deliberate about what I say. I'm going to be deliberate in how I say it and when I say it. And so I think that has been why I've consistently been tapped, because, I really try to be really prepared and always really, thoughtful and cautious and organized, but cooperative, and really making sure that what I do has a purpose and I'm not doing it just for the sake of doing it. So that's what I would always say. We always want to put positionality with leadership, but it's about purpose.
For me, I didn't ask to really be a leader either. I was the older sibling, so I kind of had to at home. So, I definitely think that translates into it now also. But I used to be like a volunteer coordinator, like in high school. I was a state commissioner actually, and I just loved it. But it also showed me like so many problems that was in the world. So I literally went home one day and was Googling, why is this a problem? Like, just put that in on Google. And from there, I just became like super, super curious, so that I knew that when I did come to UT a few years ago, I really needed to just be in those environments. And while everybody else came, I need to have student life and things like that, I neglected that. And I went straight into working with nonprofits. Also because I was like advanced, I was ahead in school. So I knew I didn't have as much time, but I knew that I wanted to learn from people who are doing it. And in those positions, it was really just learning and soaking in all that information and asking questions, like everybody has said, just being curious and asking for more work. And by them seeing me, having that drive and that determination, ended up putting me in places that I didn't know existed or expected to be in. And then it definitely came a road where people were looking at me funny because, I was speaking out at mayor events and at town halls. I got to always be the person who had to speak. And I would just sit there and be very quiet, but I still had to get up there and talk. And then, there were some people who just like, oh, you're 21 and how are you up here right now? Shouldn't you be in class? And I was like, actually I already graduated. And, well, I was looking at your reports that I pulled from online and this, and this. So now it's funny coming to like being 23 and after COVID and this whole social impact title's popular. Now there's all ages looking into me like, okay, I need help in da, 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 da. And it's just like, oh, interesting. So if it wasn't just for me being curious and being able to ask those critical questions, I wouldn't be here.
I think I'm next. First, I want to say thank you to the AAA team for having us here and for thinking of me for this fantastic panel. I think I agree with you, Alexis. I'm feeling a little bit of imposter syndrome. But the first thing that came to my mind when thinking of this question was disruption. I think for me, my my journey in leadership that I'm still currently on and will be on forever really deals with how I enter spaces and am curious, like Alexis said, being curious, asking questions, wanting to know what's going on, but also recognizing that I'm a part of a community that is often being hurt the most from whatever it is that we're trying to do. And so with those concerns and that consideration, I always make it a point to go in and kind of disrupt the norm if it needs to be disrupted. And through disrupting the norm and disrupting what has been going on, I find myself being put into spaces or into positions or having roles that allow me to have a bit more sway over what's going on or what we're going to do or how we engage in the work that we want to do. So I think for me, it's disruption and agreeing with Latoya, service, knowing that there's always a greater purpose and there's always more that we can do for our communities is what drives me and has led me in my journey for leadership thus far.
Am I next or? Oh, I am. Okay. I thought there was still more people to go. Everybody has said such wonderful things. You know, I always take it back to my mother, my Haitian mother, 81 years old, Jermaine Joseph, who, sometimes students think that I'm younger than I am. I was on my first picket line in New York City over 40 years ago on East 92nd Street. And my mother, 81 years young, about to be 82, still lives in New York City. I'm about to visit her for the first time since COVID, although we communicate online like this and by phone pretty much every day. But my mother is extraordinary. She's a feminist. She's a historian of Haiti and African America and the Caribbean and Africa. She's a writer. She was a hospital worker for over 40 years. She's a missionary. So we grew up in the Black church, Black Baptist church. And so I think the leadership qualities really were, my mother's a person I admire the most in the world, the best person I've ever met. And my mom has deep personal sincerity, deep political integrity, and a huge unapologetic love for God and for Black people. So when I was 8 years old and Ronald Reagan won the White House, the night of the election, my mom told me and my older brother that Ronald Reagan was a white supremacist and an anti-Black racist. And she talked to us about his hatred of the Black Panther Party and how this meant really bad things for Black people. And I didn't have a PhD. I was 8 years old, and everything she said that night was true. Every single thing she said that night was true. So that's the kind of house I grew up in. I grew up in a house where we were talking about white supremacy in 1979 and 1980, way before BLM and way before the protests of 2020. That was my house. And we were talking about these issues way before it was popular. And so, I take that. I think, and again, I think what you need, one of the people who I study is Malcolm X, among other people. But Malcolm always said that his credentials were his sincerity, right? His sincerity. So you need to be sincere. I think you need deep integrity. And integrity means that you have, real specific principles and ethics, that you don't ever get in trouble in those ways just because you have an ethical, a moral compass, which is very, very difficult to have in the times we live in. And then love, to really not think about people as abstractions, think about them as human beings. And when you have that, you're gonna embrace people in different ways. I think we've all met leaders who we've thought were too harsh, leaders who lack empathy and emotional intelligence, but who might have other great skills and talents. But at the end of the day, you need to love people or you're not going to be a great leader, and you need to be sincere. So I think everybody has said all these extraordinary things, but I get it from my mother, whatever lessons, and I continue. Mother has deep humility, and just is a hugely hard worker and ethical person. So I think I get it from her. Yep.
Thank y'all for your answers. Very insightful, and I really admire all of y'all's journeys toward leadership. So our next question will really be hitting on this year's theme, which is coming of age, capitalizing on your leadership potential. And so this is really critical for us as young, middle-aged 20-somethings at a time where really all of America especially, but all of the world, where a lot of these issues and cracks that we've seen in our infrastructure really coming to a head. So the question is, how would you encourage us to recognize and capitalize on our leadership potential? And we'll go in the same order. And Trinity put the question in the chat as well for your reference.
So I guess that's me to start again. This is a really great question because it's something that I've been thinking about over the last couple of months. I was asked to do a commencement speech for UT for this year, and my thought process was really about this question right now. But it added on to it. It was like, how would you encourage us to recognize our leadership potential now in a time like this, right? Like, in a time that is unprecedented for so many people to even, some people are just trying to deal with going through the day. And then on top of that, having the pressure or the expectation of oneself to then be a leader and then go be great, right? Like, that's a lot. And I kept thinking to myself, how do I position myself to stand up and speak to this generation that is adulting and that is going through this, through this system of success? And like, what do I say to them? And so for me, it's just about, be you, be you to the greatest potential that you can be. Just be okay with being you right now, because who you are right now is enough. And when you lead with knowing already that you're enough, you then become a change maker. It's almost like it's so liberating to just be yourself, right? And it's taken us like really a journey for people to be liberated in just who they are in their own skin. And so that to me is leadership. We kind of have these false ideas about what a leader is. And to be honest with you, I don't necessarily even recognize myself as a leader. I recognize myself as a person participating in this social justice ecosystem. And I have several people that do this work with me. Right. I'm very big on not kind of positioning myself at that top tier of, it's just not who I am. But and it's okay to be that too. Just wanted to let you know that. But, just again, know that you are enough right now. We kind of said a couple of times about imposter syndrome, like a couple of people have said that, and I've said that to myself. That's a real thing. But the antidote to that is knowing that you're enough already. Know that you're enough already. Right now, who you are at this moment, you are enough right now. And I think that's liberating leadership. So.
I'm over here typing up notes and points while me speaking. Part of me almost feels like we slightly have to shorten the stick because we don't have too much time to really think in terms of what it is that we would really like to say. But so you'll have to pardon me if I kind of popcorn all over the place. I just want to make sure I get to a couple of points. But first and foremost, kind of really a little bit of a tangent to what Mimi was saying about imposter syndrome yet again. I remember right after I had first mentioned it, the first quote that came into my mind was actually something that my grandfather told me my senior year while I was at UT. I vividly remember sitting on my bed in Kinsolving. I was an RA, that's why I was in Kinsolving my senior year. But anyways, I remember him saying, life is short, but you have time. And I had no idea really what that meant. At 22 years old, I'm like, what is he talking about? Like, no, there's never enough time. There's no time. Like, you have to do things now. That's not true. And I think that especially in this day and age and with this generation, I feel like I can kind of identify with a lot of y'all Gen Zers slightly. I'm a millennial. But you very much feel like you have to do so much in such a short amount of time. Like for many of us, it might be like, wow, like, oh my gosh, I'm 22 years old and I don't have all these different accolades and all these different things I've been doing. I'm not like on the keyboards of all these different organizations, et cetera, et cetera. You don't have to be, and that's fine. You do things in your own time. And so I think it's so important for you all to just recognize that, and that you're not putting a whole bunch of excess pressure on yourself because you feel like you have to perform for other people, or you have to perform in order to keep up with your peers, or just other folks who are around you, even your friends. Which leads me to another quote that always pops to my mind all the time. My mom is always saying it to me. I never, ever take it to heart. I always constantly have to say it to myself, which is that comparison is the thief of joy. So you really, really, really cannot compare yourself to other folks. And that also goes with recognizing your own leadership potential. Like, we are all different. We all have a wide variety of skills, and no one is the exact same. So sometimes, honestly, you just have to really identify what it is that you know that you are good at, and just kind of figure out how you can use those skills to actually help other people, help those around you, help your communities, your environment. Just be a doer. Ultimately, sometimes the best way to kind of get into leadership in general is just to do. We often kind of just stop ourselves because we feel like we have to plan. We have to think about like, okay, maybe there's an appropriate way to do this. But sometimes you just have to just get out there, put your foot out there, and you might mess up, you might trip, you may not know what you are doing whatsoever, but at least you're doing something and you're learning as you go. So yeah, I think this is a really interesting time for folks to be thinking about their leadership potential. It's also a bit of a high pressure time because we're constantly looking at the news and always looking at social media. And it seems like people are always doing something every single day, especially when it comes to activism and things like that. But I also think it's so important too that I know people talk about self-care all the time. I'm not going to talk about self-care, but I just think it's so important for you all to know too that there is something radical in you also taking a pause and letting other folks do things and taking a step back and just relaxing for a little bit. And then you can kind of tap back in once you feel like you've got that strength to kind of keep on persisting and moving. And I feel like, especially for a lot of you all, from what I've seen working from so many students, is that you feel like you have to go all the time, because if you're not doing it, who is? Trust me, somebody else is going to do it if you aren't doing it. Or sometimes, again, you just need to have a break. So just recognize that. I hope I've said some really interesting things. I feel like I hit all my different points, but yeah, so that's what I have to say.
Well, and I'll jump in. Just, I think I'm next. And so a lot of the points that I was going to bring up have already been said. So I think that's, great pearls of wisdom. I'll leave it there. The only thing I would add is, and I want to focus on the word recognize, the leadership potential. Sometimes it's hard when you're busy doing to recognize your own potential. And, sometimes you need, and I always say this, you need your own personal board of directors, people who are invested in you being the best you can be. Those are individuals that are going to challenge you. They're going to hold a mirror up to your face when your authenticity is being, or your sincerity is being tested. They're going to say, you need to slow down, or you need to step up. So I always, encourage people to have a personal board of directors. And, I've been collecting them along the way in my life, whether it's my parents, it's mentors, it's friends, but it's people who, again, are invested in, the business of Latoya, and for Latoya to be the best Latoya she can be, right? And so that would be the other thing that I would recommend for you all, is to get you a personal board of directors.
Before I say my answer, I love that. And I definitely reiterate that, because during COVID, I lost literally all my mentors except for one, because everybody was going through something. And it was definitely a rough time, because I don't have family that understands what I do, nor care what I do. So definitely build that board of directors. for yourself as you do get into these positions, because you're going to need to like have someone to talk to who definitely understands your scope and also just cares. But for me, I'd say that to recognize it is to definitely play to your strengths. Notice what you are strong in, because then that's probably what you're more confident in and what other people will see. And I definitely also would say lead with purpose, not for popularity and what may come with that popularity, because then you're kind of like a false leader in a way. And then also just don't be obsessed with being the leader. It's actually not all that fun. It's a lot of responsibility, a lot of contact, a lot of just keeping up and staying on your game. And I think that, that brings me to tell you, ask yourself, why do you even want to be a leader? When I got these questions, I had to sit down and like answer them on my computer, because I didn't understand why I was here. I mean, I know I'm cool at what I do, but I was like, how am I supposed to like really tell somebody else this? So figuring out, why do you want to lead? What extent do you want to lead to? What do you want people to come to you for? And also, where are you supposed to lead, right? Because while I love the political scene and I do want to continue going that way, you might be the leader of a church and they're equally important. In my opinion, being the leader of the church is more important. So don't compare yourself to where, your friend or someone you see might be, because you have your own calling and your own space for you to lead. And then just lastly, pay attention to how you govern yourself, because that will show up in your leadership career, your business career, and all of that. Do you practice what you preach? Are you confident? Do you meet deadlines? Do you know what sacrifice means? Because to be a leader, you're going to have to sacrifice. And it's not, no, well, I'll get to it last minute. And you have to remember that, when you lead, it's not just you or the people who you're leading. I don't like to call them followers, because I see myself equal with everybody who comes to me. But in addition to that, you also are leading people who you serve, whether indirectly or directly, and they will be affected if you come up short. So really paying attention to how you are in your personal life before you try to go take that, oh, I need to be a leader right away, because there will always be an opportunity for it. And like I said, it's not always that great. It could be very stressful. And that's why that self-care thing is very important, because burnout is real. And if you're in the social space, you'll be depressed a lot too. So that self-care was important too, Alexis. But yeah.
Well, everyone has hit several points that I would say. I will add that, again, just reinforcing that, recognizing who you are and what your passions are, what your boundaries are, and whatever line of work it is, or whatever field it is that you're interested in, finding your access point or finding your entry point. For me, I'm very interested in social justice and abolition, and really trying to figure out how to reimagine and build a new world. And so my entry point was fashion, or is fashion rather. And so that's where I'm the most comfortable, because I know that's where I am and that's who I am. And I think once you find that, in a very uncomfortable world, if you can find a space where you have at least a little bit of some sort of safety, then I think you will be able to really capitalize on the potential that you have as a leader. But I also will add that, who are we as individuals without our communities and our histories? And what I mean is that, at the end of the day, I think for me, what works is that I know that I come from a very strong lineage of people. I know that my family, my community, my ancestors have already been through some of the journeys and the problems and the boundaries that I'm having to cross. And knowing that they were capable in the midst of all of the treachery that was going on then, and knowing what we're dealing with now, I know that I have that backing and I have that in my blood already. So not to sound like, I don't know, too historical or whatnot, but I think that's always something that can ground you in knowing that ancestry is there, and that the power is within you already. You just need to know what to do with it and where to go with it.
George, you can never sound too historical. You can never sound, it's always really good. I would say that I would take a different tack and just say, one of the things that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. talked about was a revolution of values that was required to build this beloved community. And he also spoke about against militarism and racism and materialism. And I think the younger people are facing all of those issues in an amplified sort of neoliberal context, right? So you all are faced with everybody telling you everybody should be Amanda Gorman. And as brilliant as she is, not everybody's going to be that. Everybody's going to have a different role. She's really an outlier. She's truly extraordinary. And it doesn't mean anybody else is less extraordinary, but people play different roles. So I think one of the things that's hurting our young people now is this idea that, well, all of you have to become Amanda Gorman. You have to have 5 million Instagram followers. You're an activist with also a multi-million-dollar fashion deal. This is extraordinary stuff. And I think that that's more power to her, right? But we're all not going to become friends with Oprah Winfrey and Michelle Obama. And that's okay. You know, that's okay. But neoliberalism convinces us all that unless we have that kind of access, we have somehow failed. And it's not just your generation, it's my generation too. Not all of us are going to be Ta-Nehisi Coates. Not all of us are going to be Melissa Harris Perry or whoever we can think of as sort of the biggest and best in their fields. And we do comparison in the United States, and even among Black people, we do comparison. So the revolution of values that King called for was where we're going to basically shine that inner light that we have and sort of be the change we wanted to see. But we weren't going to base that change on the metrics of this very, very, not just racist society, but a society that is also overly materialist too. And we know this, we all feel this, right? The pandemic has shown us that, you know, things impact all of us differently, right? And that's why, you know, the whole search for intersectional justice and Black feminism, which is one of my fields of study, has been talking about this really since the 19th century. Mariah Stewart and Frances Harper and Ida B. Wells and Anna Julia Cooper, they talked about intersectionality, and they were making the argument that being Black, being a woman, being poor, and then when we think about Audre Lorde and others being queer, meant that things were impacting them differently. So they understood intersectional issues, but they wanted all of us to understand intersectional identity, right? And so one of the extraordinary positives of this moment is how so many queer and straight and cis and trans Black women and men and boys and girls are being recognized for the leaders they've always been. So that's actually a change. That's a very positive, because you can go back to the 18th and 19th century and they're there, and the 20th century, but they're being marginalized even by us. That's the whole thing. And if we don't love us, nobody's going to love us, right? So those are positives, but the negative of this period is the commodification of all of that, right? Where this is the first time in US history, and I would say world history, where if you're an activist, the neoliberal state, some activists can become wealthy. It's the first time. And I'm not saying it's their fault. And I'm not talking about people who've been smeared. And I know about conservative campaigns to smear BLM activism. So I'm not smearing BLM, but I'm just saying that is a conundrum for us. Martin Luther King Jr. never became wealthy. Fannie Lou Hamer never became wealthy. Malcolm X never became wealthy. I just want everybody to know that. Their descendants have monetized somehow, sometimes because they've had to, right? But those activists never became wealthy. We have a whole new generation, and that's what neoliberalism does. It colonizes our pain. It exploits our pain. It says that not only can we incarcerate people, but it can be a commodity if you're against incarceration. So Bryan Stevenson is brilliant and wonderful, should win the Nobel Prize, but now people, just like Val is saying, people are interested in her ideas and her presence now. People are willing to give some of us $100,000 per talk or $1 million for a book deal, all these things. And so we have to, especially your generation, has to guard against that, even as you're trying to be the best version of yourself, right? And that's why I gave the example of Amanda Gorman. So she's obviously genuine, she's brilliant. We want to see that bright star, but not all of us are going to be or should be measured by that kind of impact. We're going to have to do it within the context and the ecosystem that we create for ourselves, and that's going to be okay. So that's the best advice. Especially, I love King's notion of a revolution of values, because we don't talk about morality, and not the cheap morality of who is of age sleeping with whom, right? Of age sleeping with whom? Not that. That's gossip. I'm talking about morality of like, do we care about children and infants? Do we care about domestic violence and 37 million people are hungry every day in the country? By that measurement, we are, and Dr. King said we were in an immoral society, but he wasn't talking about the way in which we think about it, right? We weren't talking about that. So if we have a moral compass, and this is tough because I think as a society, we haven't taught young people to have a moral compass, which is why people think that they can do all kinds of things to get ahead that are unethical and lack integrity. But if you haven't been taught that, you don't have a framework, right, to live that good life, that examined life, right? Some people get their morality from the church. You can get it from a secular. So it's not about being religious or not. It's about doing the right thing. But what is the right thing, right? That's the whole thing. And we haven't taught people what's the right thing. So at 22, 23, all of you should be thinking about how do we, one, resist those triple evils that Dr. King talked about of militarism, racism, materialism. But then how do we put justice in their place? You see, that's the whole thing. So Cornel West always says that justice is what love looks like in public, right? How do we manifest that in a way that's not predicated on our own self-aggrandizement? And that's very tough. It's something that you have to walk the talk every single day, because all of us want to feel good about the work we're doing. All of us want to receive attention. All of those are human qualities. They're not flaws. It just becomes, we have to know our role, right? You're not going to be, I criticize Ice Cube when Cube came out with the contract with Black America, not because of the contract, but he was meeting with Trumpers and stepping on the stage of these Black women who are part of BLM. Part of your role as a leader, Cube, and I said it, is that you go sit in the back. That's your leadership role. Go sit in the back. You don't bum rush the stage and act like it's 1960, right? And so we all have to play a role, and your role might not become the most visible role, but it's no less important or worthwhile.
Wow. Okay. I feel like we all need to sit on that for a minute, because that was such a great way to wrap up that question. So now we're going to move on to audience questions, audience Q&A. I'm sure that all of y'all are eager to pick these people's brains after the knowledge they've given just from what we've come up with. And so you can go ahead and put questions in the chat. And for these, we won't follow the same order. Anyone can answer, and not everyone has to answer every question, obviously, for the interest of time. So if you feel so inclined, just unmute and answer. But yeah, we'll move on to audience questions. If anyone has something, you can go ahead and come off mute. No, I got a page full of notes too. And if not, I got some questions. I got more I can ask, but I'll give y'all a minute first.
I have a question. Can y'all hear me? Okay, awesome. So this is just generally for anyone. What is the most important risk that you feel like you took in your journey?
Can I answer first? Okay, cool. All right. I'd say, honestly, betting on yourself. You have to bet on yourself. Right now, I'm on a project where I'm bringing clean water to a city. I didn't study urban development or engineering or anything like that. However, after talking to people who've been working on this project for probably 4 years, I passed them up in 6 months because I just knew that I could do it. So And that's not even just to brag, but I knew I could do it. So you have to bet on yourself, no matter who's around you, how many people don't believe in you, because when you find that thing that you believe in and that you love, like he was saying, like your values, you're gonna go hard 15,000 billion, like trillion%. And just remember that. Don't be easily swayed and just do it. And when you come up with loopholes or you come up to things that's just like, oh snap, what am I going to do next? Get creative and just keep thinking and give it some time. Don't just quit. My favorite thing is I don't fail. I just learn if it doesn't work out. But for me, it's going to work out, or it's going to work how I plan. So just be flexible and believe in you and never stop.
You know what? I actually have two major risks that I took in my journey. The first risk being I went halfway across the country for graduate school when I should have stayed my behind in Texas, but I didn't. I went all the way to Philadelphia. I had no family, no friends, nobody was out there. And don't get me wrong, I definitely ended up depressed and anxious after a year. But the reality, though, is that I ended up meeting some of my best friends to this day, and they also are colleagues of mine too. Fun fact, I'm actually in New Orleans right now working remote because I'm staying with one of them. And I never ever would have had those experiences, or even kind of gotten a lot of the different like career advice that I've received if I had not left home, left the state of Texas and decided to go to Philly for graduate school. So that was a major risk that I took. But honestly, the most important risk I feel that I've taken, and it's been very recent. I just think it's important to be transparent and to let you all know that everybody who is in here again has been through some bumps and some hurdles. But for me, I actually quit my job back in 2019 without having something lined up afterwards at all. And that was a major risk as somebody who is very much a planner. Like I'm not about to just like take a leap without feeling like I have a safety net. And I had no safety net. I just knew, though, in my heart of hearts, I was like, you know what? I've done everything that I've achieved in this previous role, and I'm done. I'm just going to have to step out on faith, and we'll see where it goes. And honestly, praise the Lord, it was just 3 months that I wasn't working, and I had saved up. I had family and friends with people like who I was able to reconnect with for the first time in a very long time, because I finally took time off really for myself. And that was extremely important. And then again, just being super duper blessed, and as luck would have it, I ended up landing a dream job, which is where I am now. So yeah, sometimes you just kind of have to just take the leap. And sometimes like you don't have really great rewards unless you take great risks. Although would I go back and do it all over again? Probably not. But to be quite honest with you, I have no regrets. So yes, that was a really big risk for me.
I think for me, the risk that I've taken, which I have a very different perspective on now, is the risk of being lonely when you are in these positions or when you are engaging as a leader. Some of the spaces that I have been in have been spaces that don't look like me, there's nothing that we really share in common, but I'm there. And so I had to not be content with, but be okay with sometimes being by myself and being the only person saying something in a particular room. And now, because of that, I've been able to be more confident with my solitude and being able to say what I need to say and move on. But I think the biggest risk is knowing that you may be lonely in some of these spaces or areas or communities or whatever you may call it. But that's sometimes what it's like when you are a leader or you're perceived as such.
That's great. Thank you so much. And now we'll go on to Kiara. You have a question?
Hi, everyone. My name is Kiara Kabara. For the people who don't know me, I've recently been elected for student body president here at UT Austin, and it's the first time a Black woman has been president in over 31 years. So this is like where my question stems from, is the spaces that I have been in, just like Jordan, it's actually Jordan, he was about to hit on it. So I was shook. Um, I just feel like very uncomfortable in these spaces. However, I know that like change is is best friends with uncomfortability. And I know like when it's like your purpose, then you're gonna really be uncomfortable. So and somebody asked me yesterday, it was like, oh, do you feel like pressure since like no one has like really looked like you in this position before? And I was like, pressure, not really, but I understand, like I can see like what they're coming from. So I guess my question is to you guys, like, what advice do you have for um, Black young leaders who are stepping into a new role or a new leadership who feel like uncomfortable in what they're about to take on because your girl needs it.
If it's okay, I want to step in on this one because actually I see this in you, and I was so happy and proud of you when you won the election. Embrace being different, right? One thing I've learned recently is that people often accept initially what is the same, but over time they respect what's different and they respect what stands out. And so I think through my career, especially early on, I tried to sit and fit into these spaces, but I wasn't supposed to fit. I wasn't supposed to, look like everybody else. And so I encourage you to embrace your difference. We need to have it shaken up here at Texas. We need you to be different. So we need our leadership to be different. And so we're on this journey together as being kind of the first Black female of our DDCE. So we're gonna do this together, but we're gonna be different together.
Yeah, and I would add, Kiara, that you got to tell yourself really on a daily, and you can make this a daily practice, that you deserve to be there, so you can't, because I feel sad when I hear Black people especially talk about this imposter syndrome, because it's such nonsense, even though I know they feel it, but the externalization of it is such nonsense, because the only people who should be feeling imposter syndrome are all these white supremacists who've lied about American history and racial slavery and the rape and brutalization, super exploitation of Black people, and have profited from it from the founding of the country, even before the founding, all the way to the present. They're the people, whether they're sitting in the US Senate or they're the governor of Texas or whatever, who should feel really, really uncomfortable. So knowing, you're brilliant, you're engaged, the history, and you're curious enough to get even deeper, you deserve everything, and when you feel that way, you're gonna have the poise because you deserve it. There is no imposter syndrome. University of Texas is extremely fortunate to have all the Black folks, let alone the Black women leaders that they have, extremely fortunate, okay? And so you deserve to be here, and you're not earning your way. You have to say, look, I deserve to be here. I'm a hard worker, I'm brilliant. And you drink all that in. And so don't feel uncomfortable with your own success and with your own power, because that diminishes you, right? And again, don't ever think of yourself as an imposter or any of that stuff, because that's a psychological assault, a further trauma that they do to us, where we make it to these universities, we make it to these positions, and on top of it, we're supposed to feel bad for having overcome all these obstacles, right? And we play into their game when we do that, right? So you have to know that, look, you absolutely deserve it. You, of all people, have absolutely earned it. And that's what I'm saying. We should have the exact opposite of imposter syndrome at UT, right? We've earned it. We've earned it, and with blood, sweat, and tears. We've earned it. So just know that you deserve to be here and act accordingly. And if you need a daily meditation to do that, an affirmation of yourself, absolutely do it. I know friends who do it through reading biblical passages daily, people who meditate and do yoga, whatever practice you need. But the more you do that, and the more you find comfort in that, the less stress there'll be. And the leaders are really people who a lot of times we perceive them as stress-free, even though they're going through it, because they know they deserve to be there. And I would compare you in that sense, Kiara, to the vice president, where one of the best parts about the vice president, Kamala Harris, is how confident she is. She knows she deserves to be where she's at, and she fills up that space with real brilliance and confidence, and a deep sense of her own power.
Can I just add to that too? I love, oh my God, I'm so excited to hear this. First of all, congratulations. You know, there's something that has happened in the culture over the last 10, well, maybe 6 or 7 years now. And that's just this village of Black women coming around Black women and encouraging Black women, this village of Black people coming around Black people and encouraging Black people, this village of Black men and all people coming around each other in this sense of we appreciate one another, we trust one another, we celebrate one another. I'm asking you, Kiara, believe us when we say that we are incredibly, you know, just taken aback by this position, you taking that on, like, believe us when we say that we love you, that when we say that you are incredible, that you are amazing, that when you walk into that space, you are going to shake. Who said it in here? George said it, that you are going to create a, you know, you're going to shake the very foundation of that place. And so just believe your village and allow your village to create that space for you. If at any point you feel like it's too much, know that we are here, and know that, you know, that you have the opportunity to reach out to each one of us. I'm sure myself, feel free to call me if you need to, but you just believe your village. That's all. Believe your village.
That's great. Okay, and now we have another question from Will.
Yeah, so first, thank you all for being here. This has been a really phenomenal talk and a really timely talk. Also, I should just say, you know, I'm nobody's panelist, but yeah, Kiara, like you got it. Like when I saw that you had won, and I'm a second semester freshman. I haven't been here that long, but like next year, man, like we're all behind you. We're all very excited. The potential is so limitless. But my question kind of regards a little bit of what we've been talking. You're gonna have to excuse me because I'm kind of a rambler, so I'll get to my question. But it's kind of this intersection between, to me, how you talked about leadership is also founded in service, right? And kind of this self-awareness and self-recognition. So as a Black man, right, in a space where I'm also chasing leadership, I look back on, you know, my, you know, brief past or whatever, and all my mentors have been Black women, from my mom to Brianna and Brenna on this call right now. Like, you know, in all the spaces of leadership that I've been in, almost everyone there is a Black woman, right? So, and I think Dr. Joseph said this too, even with the, you know, Ice Cube thing, but as I'm pursuing my own leadership, right? And as I'm, you know, finding my own path and betting on myself and that kind of thing, where do you find the balance between making space for people that have been, you know, historically underrepresented, like, you know, what Malcolm X says about Black women, that kind of thing, right? Not in a patronizing kind of way, but, you know, that self-awareness, right? Like, maybe I shouldn't be at the front of this movement, but also the balance between, you know, I believe in myself and I think I am the person to lead whatever it is, whatever space I'm in. How do you kind of balance that, specifically from that lens of, you know, Black man versus letting, you know, Black women, you know, finally take the reins, you know, and lead from the front?
Yeah, you know, I'm going to tackle that first. Well, you know, I think that one, it's a great question, and it shows a lot of humility in the question. So I think you're terrific already. Just the very fact that you're formulating in that way. A lot of young people are not doing that formulation. So one, I think that when we think about Black men and Black masculinity, what we're trying to do, I think all of us who are in these spaces of higher ed, especially, but in spaces of community too, are trying to, you know, figure out what does a post sort of patriarchal Black masculinity look like, right? What does a post-homophobic, post-sexist, post-misogynistic Black masculinity look like? And we have models. I mean, Frederick Douglass was a feminist. Doesn't mean he's perfect, right? We have models of Black men, both straight and queer, James Baldwin and Bayard Rustin and others who show us certain potentials and potentialities. So I think that one of the things that you're doing, which is correct, is coming into the space with humility. The other is, how are we defining freedom for ourselves, right? How do we define freedom? So you're wanting to be a servant-oriented leader, and I think you're going to know the times for whatever project that you feel, whatever kind of, in quotes, leadership you're trying to do is based on a bigger project than yourself, right? And so from that perspective, what I think you'll see is that you're not going to necessarily care who's out in front and who's sort of the technical CEO of the project. You might care if, like, you might found something and you're going to be CEO. Well, you're the social entrepreneur, you're the person who says, hey, I have this idea. So then, but when it comes to just movement spaces, I think as you get deeper into the work, you're going to be thinking about it as a larger project than yourself, and your ability to articulate whatever facet of that project for liberation, for racial justice, for social justice that you're interested in, it's going to stand out. It's going to stand out, and you're going to be recognized and sort of rewarded for that. And there's no need to sort of throw sharp elbows in that way anyway. So I think part of what which is again, very thoughtful, your formula is one of the things that I was talking about with leadership for Generation Z, or whatever generation we're saying is 18 to 22, right? There is a competitiveness because of capitalism about who comes out first. There's a competitiveness in an underlying way with all of us at UT, because there aren't enough necessary slots for all of us. Not everybody's going to be president of the University of Texas. There's only one. Not everybody's going to be the provost. Not everybody, however many deans we have, there's more people who want to be deans than the dean slots, right? So we have to understand that. But the positive, what Dr. King says, and this is where I said, this is where, again, if we're going to do this, revolution of values is important. Dr. King said that everyone could be great because everyone could serve, right? So with Black men, a lot of times historically, people thought that the role of Black men was to become the same as their white counterparts. And that's why Malcolm warned us when he said you didn't want to integrate into a burning house. Because what's going on in terms of the United States and white families and white supremacy, that shouldn't be our model. You know, white patriarchal authority and its connection to wealth and power and status shouldn't be the model for Black people or for Black men, right? And so I think the crux of your question becomes, how do we define ourselves and our own humanness, our own humanity? And from that perspective, do we need to be first, or do we need to contribute to this larger project in ourselves? And in that contribution, are we going to become leaders in that contribution? Yes. And so it's going to happen for you. And I think you're coming at it with such a brilliant kind of deeply vulnerable humility. You're a leader already. So you don't even have to chase the leadership. You use that phrase, Will. The only thing I'd say that you're actually not, just the very fact that you're coming with an open heart saying, I want to help. I want to figure this out. You're not chasing leadership. You don't ever have to chase leadership. It's going to come. That which is within you always comes out, which is why some people who pretend to be leaders, we find out their shortcomings under pressure, because that which is within is always going to come out, right? So I think you're on the right path. You can elevate Black women, you can elevate trans, you can elevate Black men, and in doing so, you're going to elevate yourself. People are going to recognize that humility, and you're going to have the recognition that you want, just in the acts of service. So that's what we're trying to talk about, acts of service. While I like that you're acknowledging that we can also be ambitious even as we're service-oriented leadership, because we are complicated people. We are flawed people. We can be servant-oriented leaders and other aspects of ourselves all at the same time. And we know we are. That's why we can't have the cheap morality of saying that we're not complex, complicated people.
Wow. On that, I hate that I have the awful job of having to cut y'all off between questions, but we are right at 4:40. We can go into our closing remarks. I want to thank all the panelists for taking the time out of your super busy schedules to be here with us and for imparting your wisdom. And thank you for everyone for coming out to our event. I'm sure that you all learned as much as I did. I hope you did. And if you'd like to watch this or share it with a friend, it'll be on our YouTube channel, the African American Affairs YouTube channel, by the end of next week. And for our panelists, if you're comfortable, please drop some of your contact info in the chat and email or something so students can continue to reach out to you, connect with you, network with you, because wow, this is just incredible. It's great hearing from you all, even on the Zoom, getting to see you. And to keep up with all things AAA, be sure to follow us on social media at UT_AAA. And thank you so much, everyone. Again, have a lovely end to your evening.
Thank you all. Thank you all.
Thank y'all.
Thank you. Excellent job, AAA.
Thank you.
Excellent job. Thank you, everyone.
Guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy Earth Day.
Hey, AAA, can we hang on for a minute,
Yeah.
please?
Yeah, sure.
Doing Instagram, and then I have to.
Thank you, Dr. Joseph. You were too much. And he's my friend, Dr. Joseph. Oh my goodness.
No, Malik,
Incredible. Thank you.
Hey, Brianna, how you doing?